Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our webinar. We are so pleased to be with you this Wednesday evening and to be bringing you the similarities that have happened between 2000 and 2020. We look forward to sharing that with you, and we have Scott here with us tonight. Good evening, Scott.
Awesome, Lee. Well, thanks so much for setting this up. And I'm actually really excited about tonight. You know, sometimes I do webinars that, you know, it's the same sort of format, and I do sort of very similar content over and over again. And Lee and I had a conversation, and with Willem van der Post as well, and it was like, right, let's challenge ourselves to add real value and to create new content, new learning. And you know, doing that is actually really difficult. You know, you've got to start from scratch. You've got to go and do a huge amount of work. And but it's been so enlightening for me. You know, I've learned so much, and it's been brilliant. You know, there are a bunch of hunches that I had, and you can kind of bring them all together in terms of trends and understanding. So I want to welcome you on a journey. Not only tonight, we've got a 7-part series, and this is the first one in the series. Now, they're not necessarily in a sequential order, and you don't have to, you know, if you're listening to this and you've actually listened to other ones, and you know, on a recording or something, it doesn't matter, because each one will be self-contained. However, if this is the first one, and well done for being on the first one, there is some logic to building a foundation, and then, you know, building the building on top of the foundation, and finally putting the roof on. So I'm really, really interested. And I think the question that I've been asking myself and talking to other people and attending a whole bunch of webinars is that there's a huge amount of similarities between the year 2000 and the year 2020. And what did all the major players do 20 years ago? What can we learn? You know, if I've learned one thing in life, you know, history repeats itself. Patterns and trends, you can learn a lot from history. And that's why I love reading biographies and going and looking at success stories. And, you know, people can focus on the failures, or they can focus on the successes. And what's really important is that you can learn lessons from both the failures and from the successes as to what they did. Now, you could argue that the times have changed, but people's human emotion doesn't change. And booms and busts, you know, people's human emotion doesn't change. And the facts and fundamentals of investing and real estate and business don't change. And the laws of nature don't change. And therefore, what's really interesting is that as much as people will tell me, yeah, but times are different, they're not. And there's actually a pattern and a consistency that happens. And that's really what I've learned. And so, but I wanted to start before we get into this. And Lee, this includes you. I went and spent some time looking back 20 years ago and found some pictures, you know, of what was happening 20 years ago. And I'm embarrassed, I can't even remember what this guy's name was, but I think we all kind of recognize the picture. And this was funny. They're making fun of Trump 20 years ago, which I think is hilarious. You know, someone with a handy cam, this guy with a beeper. These two really excited, and apparently these are all famous celebrities, but unfortunately I'm not very good at this stuff. With their new Mac computer, this person, you know, on their cell phone. Obviously, we also forget that, like, everyone thought we had Y2K and the world was going to fall apart, and we were all quite excited in 2000 because the world hadn't fallen apart. And obviously, kind of Time magazine and kind of Brad Pitt and you know, this is the little bit I know about celebrities, because I used to love Friends, but. You know, for me, the question I've got for you, and let's look in the chat box. What were you doing 20 years ago? What can you remember that was meaningful for you from 20 years ago? Because it literally was 20 years ago. And oh, there were Ali G. Thank you for Gavin sending that through. Gavin and I were at school together, and I'm sure he would, you know, I certainly didn't know much about pop culture, music, or pretty much any of these pictures that were up here. And that didn't change when I went to university. It probably hasn't changed either. So I got a question for people. What were you doing? And whether you want to answer it or not, what I'd like you to do is just take 10 seconds, 20 seconds, and think about it. Like, I want to make this personal. Not what did Scott do, but what were you doing 20 years ago? Because I'm almost willing to bet you that almost without fail, every single person that was on this webinar and has listened to this webinar was born 20 years ago. And therefore, everything we're going to talk about was happening during a time you were alive. And if it was like me, I was even out of university already, and I was already starting to work. And therefore, you know, these were all happening around me. I was fully aware. I was reading the newspaper and whatever. Whether I was aware they were going on, that's a whole separate conversation. But all the things that we're going to talk about tonight were happening in real life while we were part of them. And so people have got matric exams, got married, Zimbabwe and the invasions, credit controller. I was using Windows 2000 and fifth upgrade. Short-term living in the UK and wasting money. That sounds very similar. Got married. What else we got here? Studying, invested in my first residential property. I was running corporate company in Tunisia, slugging lettuce in London. I remember that well, Gavin. Y2K technician, studying technical college, engineer, graduated from university, was in the middle of a project, building the airport in White River, had a struggling business. I think that year I was expelled from high school. So anyway, thank you for all the people that have shared. I appreciate it. And hopefully everyone that's on this webinar, it's caused you just to take some time to reflect. If we get simple, my question is, did you own a laptop or computer? Now, I wouldn't have even asked that question today, because if you didn't, well, certainly we wouldn't even be having this conversation. But, actually in 2000, it was quite, ahead of its time to have a computer and definitely to have a laptop. And I actually tried to find a picture, and whether this is exactly accurate or not, I had a Dell. I remember in 1999 when I went to London, I bought my first Dell laptop, and it would have looked something similar to this. And if the picture's a bit blurry, I apologize. Pictures from 20 years ago apparently didn't have as many pixels. Did you own a Walkman? I tend to joke with people, but I did this in one of the videos, but this is we used to all carry this around with all our CDs and stuff, and then suddenly, well, obviously, with our Walkmans, and then literally in 2001, most people don't remember, but the first iPod came out. Okay, and then they got a bit smaller, and then this thing came along and got rid of all of them. Like their own company got rid of all of themselves and their products. And so, did you own a Walkman? And more importantly, did you own a cell phone? And I remember I got my first cell phone in '99, and my mom said I was extravagant, and it was. I was an early adopter. I was well ahead of my trend. I was the only mate. My one friend had a cell phone at university in 1998, and I thought that was super cool. So I wanted one as soon as I started working. But I mean, we were well ahead of who had phones, and I had one of these Nokias that were bulletproof. The battery lasted about 4 years. So what was I doing 20 years ago? Well, I went to London in '99, and I got a job in a construction company, and I basically. So I'd been there a year, and in 2000, I was actually, funny enough, I was at a mate's house, and I don't know what this happened, but we were supposed to go out, and I was paging through a magazine that was on his coffee table while we were waiting for him to get ready. And I don't know, I can't remember, why or what, but I started looking through this, and it was courses, and I found that there was a master's in construction IT. Now I did an undergraduate BSc in honors in construction management with my thesis in how technology was going to change the construction and property industry, which again, today makes quite a lot of sense. In 1998, that industry could not spell IT. And the point being is that I found this master's, and there were two places in the whole of England that offered it. One was in Manchester, and one was the University of Greenwich. And I didn't want to go to Manchester. I had no desire to go to Manchester. So I went to the University of Greenwich, and I'll never forget, it was February. It was just around the time of my birthday. And the guy was like, look, we started in January and we'd love to have you, but you can start next year. And I was like, no, that's not an option. Like, I'm starting this year. And he was like, yeah, but you're 3-4 weeks behind. I was like, I don't care. Like, I'll catch up. Anyway, long story short, I did a full-time job, 6 days a week on top of a full-time master's. And in a year and a half, I completed it, and I did it with distinction, et cetera, et cetera. And as I said, there were only 2 universities in the whole of England that offered a master's in the bridge between construction, property, and technology. And so that's what I did. I wish I could show you pictures of me at the university, but as I got a very funny post today, we have lots of memories, but no, what's it called? Not no experience, but no, just forgotten the word now. It was brilliant. the 90s, many memories, no evidence. There's no picture. I can't find a picture. So I had to put up pictures and my degree. So although I got my degree in 2001, it was my only evidence that I actually even went to the university. But really why it's relevant for today, 20 years later, is that for 20 years now, and longer, 22 if you consider I did my dissertation in 1998 at my undergrad level, I've spent at the evolution of technology and property and these evolving trends. And really what I'm going to share with you today is there's a lot we can learn from the evolution of multiple industries. And not only where we sit now with COVID and all the strategic changes that have happened in our lives, but if we look at the patterns that were happening 20 years ago, the same patterns are happening again. And if I've learned one thing through the laws of nature and history repeating itself, is when patterns repeat themselves, it's called pattern recognition. And the easiest way to predict the future is through pattern recognition. And so what I'm going to share with you tonight is, or today, depending on what time zone you're in, is pattern recognition. Now, why am I doing that? Well, because I want to help you get clear on where the world is now, and it'll help you make much better decisions on where the world is going and what you are going to do about it as an individual. So let's look in the media. If you go to the media now, some of you have seen some of these reports that I put in here, and it's so interesting because, you know, this report is from July, and you would say like it's, you know, it's actually completely out of date because he only made another 28 billion between July and this report. Okay, if you look here, the next one, Jeff Bezos adds 13 billion in a single day. It's not bad for a day's work. You know, Elon Musk is now worth more than Warren Buffett as Tesla stock continues to break records. China closed, so Google invests 10 billion in India following Facebook, Amazon, and Apple. Magnus Haystack wrote an article. He's a economic commentator, and he said, you know, you got to invest offshore, and specifically he said you got to get involved in tech stocks, which is what he started doing as far back as nearly a decade ago. And then this is really interesting. This is more recent. This is August the 27th, so it's 2 weeks old. And Jeff Bezos hit 200 billion, and his ex-wife is one of the richest women. E-shoppers in India was up 42% in the last 6 months. So pre-COVID, post-COVID, 42%. Now, what does that mean? Well, Amazon earnings have gone up. So it's not just based on hype, although I definitely think there is hype involved. I want to be very clear here. And but their earnings have gone down. Now, what people don't talk about is the reports, and I should probably find a news headline for it, where in April, May, Amazon invested $4 billion in growing the business and taking advantage now 20 years later. But what did they do 20 years ago in a similar time? Amazon just put Tesla on notice. They bought an electric car company. Fascinating article. And just by the way, anyone watching this live is going to get the slides. Okay, so you're going to get the slides, and at the end of the slides are all the links to all this. If you're not watching it live, you're not part of Owner Circle, or you're not a wealth partner, you can go and use Google. Digital platforms and private markets are changing the future of investing. We're going to talk a lot about that tonight. And then this is also quite interesting. When one looks at the NASDAQ, and we're going to talk a lot about this now, but you know, you can obviously see the NASDAQ has grown and where it is. And if you look at it, you know, we're going to go back to you know, days back as far back as, let's go to the max. And we're going to go back to days around the 2000, 2001 boom, internet boom bust scenario. And what's also interesting, we can also talk around the impact COVID had, and you can see how it went down, and then this sharp rise that, with all due respect, in my opinion, in some of these tech stocks, is a complete bubble. It's like, it's now the fundamentals are there. I'm talking the short term, because if you look at this, even if you look in the last month, look at that graph. So it's interesting. It bounced today. It's been on a bit of a downward trend over the last 3 days, and it bounced again. Okay, but I'm not in the game of day trading or trading. Like, if we start talking shares, you're on the seriously wrong webinar. I'm interested in long-term trends. Like, we're looking at 20-year trends. Okay, that's what this webinar is about. Okay, so I'm not, if you think I'm going to sit here and tell you how to buy or sell Apple, you're in the wrong place. So what does this mean? Well, what's fascinating is that Amazon stock is actually stored 80%. Now, you could argue higher or slightly lower based on what I've just shown you with the S&P in terms of what's happening. and has been dramatically outpacing the rest of the market in terms of what's happening. E-commerce is up 42%. I said that in India. Musk is now one of 4 center billionaires, and his fortune has grown to 73.6 billion this year. Where Amazon and Jeff Bezos is up 87 billion. Mark Zuckerberg is over 100 billion, and on Wednesday rose 8.5. Lee, how would you feel if you just made, I don't know, maybe just 1 billion versus Jeff Bezos at 13 or Mark Zuckerberg at 8?
I need to ask my husband what he and I are doing wrong.
Well, I could argue doing many things right because we're on this webinar and we're team members. But what's interesting to me is that it's not just the US. It's happened. There's a guy we're going to talk about in India called Mukesh Ambani, who actually is the first Asian to be ranked in the world's top 5 in the world. Okay, he's gained 22, et cetera, et cetera. And we'll go into some of these details. And then finally, in India, big focus on India and China. And equally what's happened in China with Tencent, which is WeChat for those who do or don't know, and Alibaba and Jack Ma and obviously the team, and everyone's happy. So 20 years later, it's easy. It's like, and Warren Buffett said, when car companies were all the rage in 1910 to 1930, when he was lambasted for not investing in tech stocks in the 90s, the late 90s, Warren Buffett said there were 400 car companies in 1910 to 1930, and the majority of them failed, and 5 or 6 of them were winners. And he said, how would I choose, the Henry Ford and the Chrysler between everyone else? And my attitude with this is that same thing happened in the dot-com boom bust, because we basically had this huge rise and then this huge crash. But 20 years later, we need to look back and look at the patterns of what happened. Okay. And one of the first and most important things is what's called the adoption curve. Okay. So whenever you look at an adoption curve, there's always the early innovators, and then the early adopters, then the early majority. Now, no business gains real value until it's into the early majority. Then it gets the late majority and the laggards. So as an example, 1999, I go out and buy a cell phone. Some of you have seen me say this before. I was buying it for pleasure. I did not need it. Okay, I wasn't offered it by my company or my job. I bought it for pleasure. Nowadays, if you don't have a cell phone, you're literally out of business. So it's pain. Okay, it's even laggards have cell phones now, and that's what pain is. And what's interesting is that people's behavior is driven 4 times more. They move 4 times more away from pain than they do towards pleasure. Now, please understand that tonight we're going to talk a lot about adoption curves and how often people, again, are not driven by pleasure. 4 times more are driven by pain. And when you talk about the technology shifts that are going on that happened 20 years ago and the patterns that are being repeated now 20 years later, we are going through a paradigm shift, which is primarily happening through pain. And that's when you know that you're going to have dramatic, long-lasting change, because pain is driving it, not pleasure. This is not a nice to have. This is a necessity. And that's really where Wealth 5.0 comes in. Now, I'm going to talk a lot about this later, but at the end of the presentation, what the purpose of tonight is to teach you and to add as much value as possible. However, for those of you that want to get practical, I'm going to share with you what is happening with Wealth 5.0, what an opportunity is to actually invest based on these trends. And there's a whole thing around Investor 4.0 and now Investor 5.0, and how you get growth in a sustainable way, and what a venture builder is. And then I'm going to share with you what we're actually doing and how literally people can participate in these future trends. And rather than just understand it theoretically, you can get practically involved. I'm going to talk about our meta marketplace. If you want to leave by then, that's your choice. But it's an invitation for people to stay and actually hear about a real life opportunity with a real life business and what we're actually doing about it. And, I tend to joke with people, and, just like Amazon did 20 years ago, Amazon was a little known company no one knew about. And now you've got Amazon. And 20 years later, I say, well, why could you not have the Amazon of personal wealth? And tonight you might just be on a webinar that is about that. So let's look back 20 years ago and let's look at it. You can see this rise and fall. It was absolutely dramatic. March the 10th, 2000 was the peak of the market. And just by the notice this number here, 5,048. Lee, can you remember what I just said the NASDAQ was at now? roughly, plus minus. And I'm not asking to put you on the spot. I'm asking everyone to think through if they can remember what that number was.
No.
So you can see here, like the kind of the NASDAQ and where like Yahoo gets involved. And you can see Amazon, Amazon goes public in 1997 and everything starts to get like really frothy right through to 2000 when AOL does this massive deal. And then in 2000, it goes completely pear-shaped and it goes plummeting down the other side. And like 80% of values is wiped out on the stocks. And again, what's really interesting for me is patterns. Okay. And what are the patterns? What is the recognition? What can we learn from this time? So that, because patterns will repeat themselves and are repeating themselves, and what can we learn and do about it? What's really interesting, again, if you look at the pattern, I'm not here to talk to you tonight about what to do in the next 6 months or even the next year. I'm here to talk about what's going to happen in the next decade and the next 20. Okay. And again, if you look at the pattern and the NASDAQ, and I did this yesterday, and you can see actually that they were on or about 5,000. They went down to 1,000 to put it in perspective. Okay, and everyone thought it was the end of the world, and tech stocks went sideways for a long time. Look here, 2001 through to kind of probably 2010 even, they hadn't even got back to equilibrium. Okay, but now they're sitting at 10,000, 10,900 to be exact. Call it 10,000. So it's doubled since 2001. And what's really important is that that's the whole market. And now what we're going to talk about tonight is what are the patterns and lessons. And then more importantly, what did the outliers do differently to everyone else during that time? So let's look at it. Let's start off with one of my favorites, Amazon.com. You probably have seen this picture. It's 1999. It's 2 years after they had already listed. What some people don't know is that Jeff Bezos was actually a successful stockbroker out of New York. And when he was talking to his mates in 1994, he was like, this whole internet thing is actually, it's got some legs to it. And he resigned from his job. He gave up his cushy job in New York and he moved to Silicon Valley. And he set up Amazon in late 1994 and went live in late 1994, pretty much early 1995. They listed in 1997. And you could argue and say that they got a lot of money, but he was always very frugal with cash. And you can see this now. This is literally 1999. It's 2.5 years after listing. And this was Amazon.com and this was his main office. So what are the lessons we can learn from Amazon? And there are a lot. The first one is that this is their journey. And, you know, they've ridden a wave for 20 years, in fact, 25 years to be exact. They've ridden the internet wave, they've ridden the e-commerce wave, and it's created tremendous value, not only for the founders, but also for people that invested. If you invested $10,000 pre-IPO, today it was worth, and by the way, Lee, you'll remember some of these stats. It was worth 12 million when I did this last in March. It's now worth 20 million. So again, March to now, less than 6 months, it's gone up $8 million. Now, what can we learn? What did they do? Because what's really interesting is while all their competitors around them were going bankrupt in 2000 and trying to save their way to success, they did completely differently. They went out and they raised a convertible debt, a convertible bond, as Americans call it, with overseas investors. And that was the reason they were not only able to survive, but they were able to invest in their long-term profitability. Now, I'm going to share some stuff tonight about how he did it, but with cash. Okay, and actually it did them a favor because it wiped out all their competition. They offered 6.9% with flexible conversion terms, which times were changing. You know, what you could do in 99 and what you could do in 2000, 2001 were completely different. And it's no different pre and post COVID. They became a platform. So rather than just being a single business, they became a platform to other businesses. And ultimately, their business strategy not only helped Amazon, but helped propel even their competitors. And they became their own biggest customer. So the platform mindset is really what changed the game. Now, I want to share this video with you. And it's a brilliant video. It's 4 minutes long.
Hello, my name is Jeff Bezos. I started Amazon.com about 15 years ago. A lot has happened over the last 15 years. As I said, we've made a lot of mistakes. We've learned some things. And I want to tell you everything I know. I can guarantee you everything I know. It's a very short list. This won't take long. And it's complete too. All right, well, the first thing I know is that you need to obsess over customers. I can tell you that we have been doing this from the very beginning, and it's the only reason that Amazon.com exists today in any form. We've always put customers first. When given the choice of obsessing over competitors or obsessing over customers, we always obsess over customers. We pay attention to what our competitors do, but it's not where we put our energy. It's not where we get our motivation from. We really like to start with customers and work backwards. And again, that is the key thing that I know, and it covers a lot of other mistakes. If you're truly obsessed over customers, it'll cover a lot of errors. The second thing I know is invent. It's really important to invent. Anytime we have a problem, we never accept either or thinking. We try to figure out a solution that gets both things. And that often requires invention, but you can invent your way out of any box if you believe that you can. And what we talk about is inventing on behalf of customers. It's not a customer's job to invent for themselves. You need to listen to customers. It's critical. If you don't listen to customers, you'll go astray, but they won't tell you everything. And so you need to invent on their behalf. And that focus on invention has served us well. Some of the recent things, even Kindle, not just Kindle, but EC2, the Elastic Compute Cloud. These are things that we would have never gotten to if we didn't have an inventive culture. But also, those are kind of large grain things, but there are small things too. And then think long term. This is really critical. Any company that wants to focus on customers and put customers first, any company that wants to invent on behalf of customers has to be willing to think long term. And it's actually much rarer than you might think. I find that most of the initiatives we undertake may take 5 to 7 years before they pay any dividends for the company. They may start paying dividends for customers right away. They often take a long time to pan out for shareholders in the company. So that ability to think in sort of 5 years and 7-year time frames really is very, very useful for us, and it's definitely one of the things that I know. It requires, by the way, and allows a willingness to be misunderstood. If you think long term, many of the inventions that we undertake, maybe if they're disruptive in any way, they may not be understood in the early innings, and it's always been very important for us to think long term so that we can tolerate being misunderstood. We've been called Amazon.toast, Amazon.con, many different things, many of them not appropriate for a video. And if we think we're right, then we continue. If we think we're wrong, if we're criticized about something we think we're wrong, we change it, we fix it. So it's important to really think about those things, but never to buckle to sort of standard kinds of pressures that come on that really force short-term thinking. And it's a huge competitive advantage to be able to think long-term, and you get to serve customers much better. And that brings me to my final thing that I know. It's always day one. There's always more invention in the future, always more customer innovation, new ways to obsess over customers.
So I hope you enjoyed that video. I've watched it so many times, and it's such a simple way of explaining it. So let's sum up what we put here. What did they do differently 20 years ago? Well, when everyone else was running around and trying to save their way, to success, they went out and raised a convertible debt, 6.9% plus favorable terms. They used it for innovation. They used it for marketing. They used it to become a platform business. And on top of that, they put a number of different marketplaces. And again, everyone knows Amazon, but there's many other marketplaces that they enabled. The 4 lessons that he just spoke about to highlight for you. The first one is obsess over customers. The second one is event with flywheel concept. So this is a great little resource that I'm going to be sharing with you. And Roger Hamilton did a review of 10 different entrepreneurs. And I'm going to be jumping through them because I've got to be able to find them. But this story is about Jeff Bezos. Now, you've got all these links, and he actually talks about how Jeff Bezos went out and found the secret sauce 19 years ago. And they talk about it being the virtuous cycle. Okay, it's called the flywheel concept, where Lower prices lead to more visits. More customers increases the volume of sales. Volume of sales attracts third-party sellers. More third-party sellers leads to better economies of scale. Better economies of scale led to lower prices. And Uber, as an example, was the same thing. The more taxis, the more people used Uber because they were more accessible. The more people used Uber, the more the more people wanted to be drivers in Uber, and it's called the flywheel concept. But it was all about inventing and not going, well, we don't have the money, we can't do this or whatever. Another great example of inventing is, they don't accept this either or thinking. It's about getting both. And he tells the story of when they did Amazon Prime, and all the accountants and all the board members and even all their leadership team were like, it's absolutely crazy. We're going to go out of business. There's absolutely no ways we can do this for $9.99 and have free shipping and whatever. Like, every mathematical model said it's wrong. And his hunch was, do it, because you're going to build a raving fan base that are going to want to use you on an on basis. And that alone brings in like something ridiculous now. Like, I think they've got 100 million Prime members around the world, and it's all passive income, as in it's annuity income. And that's really what he was talking about with inventing on behalf of customers. Then thinking long term, again, I'm reiterating what he said, but 5 to 7 years, and often it doesn't pay dividends. And if you're playing the long game, you and your shareholders need to understand it's a long game. There are not short-term wins. It just doesn't work like that. And then you need to have a willingness to be understood. And I tend to joke with Lee when I've played this before, but it's certainly something that I've had to embrace myself and as our team. And then the part I like most is that every day is day one. You have a COVID, and it's like, well, so whether you're winning or losing, you've got to always be realistic as to exactly where you're at. So let's look at that story and look at it again, because what's really actually important is that when they had the dot-com boom bust, it wasn't all a hero's journey. Their share price, when they, just before the dot-com boom, the dot-com bust, was $76, and it went to $6, and it stayed $6 or less than $76 for 6 years. So everyone talks about all this famous stuff, but they don't talk about this story. And again, $10,000 invested post the dot-com bust would actually be worth 152 million in March and 274 million. So again, sometimes you don't have to be involved in the IPO, you just have to be involved in the timing, taking advantage of the market. And what's interesting is that I did a little bit of research here, and again, it's all around the platform business. That was the pain of the dot-com boom bust, forced them to pivot into the platform business that today has really yielded these results, where they've literally grown pretty much 100% in the last since COVID, basically, to become $1.7 trillion in value, and obviously astounding wealth for the people that were part of it. So let's look at Alibaba and what they did. So Jack Ma was a school teacher who was turned down, and if you listen to his videos, they're fascinating, by Harvard. He was turned down by KFC, and what was interesting is 24 people went for the job application. 23 of them got a job with KFC, and he was turned down, and 30 different jobs he was turned down for. And he eventually, got a company up and running and had a job working for the government. And he eventually decided to quit and set up Alibaba in 1999. Now, again, it was boom times, that makes sense, except he wasn't in America. He was in China. There was no internet in China. There was no market. There was no boom times in China, basically. They had no revenue for 4 years. This is critically important. Everyone wants to chase revenue. I know I want to chase revenue. And yet their logic was no, distribution, build customer loyalty. Talk about obsessing over customers. What about giving it to them for free and making it so wonderful? For 4 years, they didn't make $1. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not saying they made $1 in profit. I'm saying they didn't make $1 in revenue. They were not charging a cent. And in 1999, they got $25 million of funding. And in 2001, combined, they got $25 million of funding. Now, again, just notice the timing. You have the dot-com boom bust. And this is right in the heart. The second round of funding, which was the much larger round of funding, was right in the heart of the crash. And in 2003, they used that funding to launch Taobao Marketplace and Alipay. There's just about 400 million people now that use Alipay, and it's actually listing as a completely separate company all on its own at the moment. And then I love this story. I know it's not about 2000, but it shows you the resourcefulness of the character. In 2010, sales were down. They weren't going anywhere. And in America, you had Black Friday and Cyber Monday and all these e-commerce days, and there was nothing in China. And so they literally created Singles Day. And in 2010, to try and help them boost sales. And they had 27 merchants, and they gave a 50% discount. And what's really interesting is that these are the results that have been created since then. And you can see how it just geometrically changed things in terms of the growth. And $30 billion in 2018 and $38 billion last year. It's like every year it's a number of world records that have been set. And again, I've got the link to the entire article. You can go and read it. But just this points to this resourcefulness nature, not only in a time of pain. You know, there's another story where they had their own version of COVID. It was SARS back in 2000, 2001, and they couldn't go. They all had to work from home, and it very nearly bankrupted them. And the story is just how they worked together and how they got resourceful and how they got stock out on the platform and got it working. And it's absolutely fascinating when you hear these success stories. When everyone else was failing, and I want to keep repeating this, it was not that these companies had different luck. It was that they had different mindsets. And what's really interesting is that despite retiring from Alibaba, Jack Ma has seen his wealth grow 38 billion to 48 billion, while Alibaba is booming and the Ant Group is about to IPO. So let's look at Elon Musk. And if we take that time, he started a company, and in 1999, Elon Musk and his brother used the money from their Zip2 sale to Compaq Computers to found X.com, which was an online financial service and payment company. And then later, that following year, that actually merged with a company, and they became PayPal. Okay, we probably all have heard of PayPal. And in October 2002, so right during the crash, they not only survived, but they thrived. But what people don't probably know is that they used to pay people money. So like, say I was trying to refer Lee, they would pay me money to refer Lee, okay? Although they weren't making any money out of Lee. And it was costing them an absolute fortune. And people were like, you absolutely crazy, okay? And they had to be resourceful to find ways to do it. And yet, a year later, eBay bought them for $1.5 billion, and Musk became a billionaire. And that's where the story only starts. It doesn't even, most people would end at that point, but this is where he starts. And he says, well, my dream actually has always been to get to Mars. My purpose is to solve human challenges. So we need to go to Mars, and we need to have electric cars, and we need to have batteries. And so in 2002, he started SpaceX. In 2003, he started Tesla Motors. Now, everyone sees these stories and they think, wow, you know, what a success story in the last 5 years. Nope, it's been going nearly 20 years itself. And if you've listened to his autobiography, of all the money he made in his PayPal sale, he was down to his final 20 million. His last money. He literally said he took everything and put it into these companies. And he was down to his final 20 million, and he needed 20 million. And he actually, he wrote a check, like he put the money in, 20 million. He put his last sentence. So although he had $1 billion, he went back to naught during a time of crisis. And so when you look at his results 20 years later, you know, no person can turn around and say it was luck. He was prepared to bet and put it all on the line for his vision and his dream of where things was going. And that's because he was driven by something much more than profit. He was driven by purpose. And what's interesting is that from 22 billion last year, it's gone to 84 billion this year. And the growth of Tesla has seen his wealth more than triple, making him the 4th richest man in the world this year. So was he lucky, or did he plan 20 years ago for where the world was going and then solve massive human challenges and ultimately build a valuable business out of it? What about Mahoshi's son? Probably not as well known, but these are quite long articles, so I'm not going to read it all out. But at the height of the dot-com bubble in late 1999, he basically, his net worth was surging 10 billion a week because he had invested all his money into different tech startups. And for 3 days, he was the richest man in the world. And then the dot-com boom bust happened, and his share price lost 75% in 2 months, 93% lower at the end of 2000, and the business almost went bankrupt. He lost most of his wealth. Again, somehow I survived. The day, peer-to-peer, at the time, now it is time to go to the next stage, which is the internet will become mobile internet. And he actually started investing, and he did a deal with Vodafone for China. And but what was also interesting in this time where he had so little cash, yes, he invested in Yahoo in 1995 when he did have cash, but he also invested in Alibaba. So if you remember what I said to you, Alibaba got a second investment, and he put in $20 million into Alibaba. And his holding in Alibaba now is 29.5%, which is worth over $100 billion. And it's worth quite a lot more now in terms of where it is. And then on the back of that, he's actually created the SoftBank investment vehicle, and that's the $100 billion Vision Fund. And it basically invests in emerging technologies like artificial intelligence, robotics, and Internet of Things. Something else they invest in is companies that are revolutionizing the real estate, transportation, and retail. And what's interesting is he raised 45 billion in 45 minutes for the Vision Fund. And the last thing I'll say is that even though WeWork and Uber have taken quite a big hit during COVID, his net worth has grown from 22 billion to 30 billion in this last 6 months. So what can we learn from him in terms of, the betting on the future and where things are going? And then this one, I decided last night to add, she's one of my favorites. And I also thought, Lee, that it was important that it wasn't all males. And Sheryl Sandberg in 2001, so remember we've just spoken about the boom, the bust, and blah, blah, blah. She left her job in the White House, okay, to join a little known company. And interesting enough today, Lyndon said to me, yeah, but we haven't earned the right to be Google. And I was like, dude, we're not talking about Google today. We're talking about Google in 2001 when no one knew who Google was. And she became general manager with no business unit. As in, it wasn't that she had a job with no title or whatever. There was no business unit. She basically turned up. And so she left her corporate job with all the safety and security of working at the White House in the middle of the boom bust crisis to join Google, okay, with no title. And she went on to build a team of 4 people. And when she left Google, there were 4,000 people in her team. And Google had gone from making no revenue to being profitable. And on the back of that, she basically left and joined Facebook. And interestingly enough, again, when was the last crash? It was the GFC. And she joined Facebook. They had no revenue model. They weren't making revenue. Again, not profit. They weren't making revenue. And in late 2008, she joined. And by 2010, they were profitable. Right in the heart of the last crash. So basically, when everyone else was crying, they became profitable in 2010. She became the first woman on the board in 2012. And what's interesting, in the last 12 months, her wealth has grown 1.8 billion to 2.4 billion. So not bad for taking a leap of faith on where the world was going back in 2001, I would suggest. And that's why, Lee, I think you and your husband are in the right direction, because you're playing to where the trends are going, and not trying to figure out what you should have done 20 years ago. What about Naspers? A good old Afrikaans newspaper company from South Africa. And it purchased 46.5% of an internet company called Tencent back in 2001. Again, please notice the consistency of the timing. I'm hoping it's planting, pennies are dropping. The investment paid off, boosting Naspers to an all-time high and making it the most valuably publicly traded business in Africa by 2017. Its initial investment was 32 million, which has ballooned to over 175 billion. Notably, the market value of Tencent Holdings was greater than the entire market cap of the firm itself. And the move has been referred to as one of the most successful venture capital investments of all time. And that's where the story tends to end. Everyone knows the story of Naspers. What they don't know is that the CEO, Koos Becker, back as far back as 1996, said that China was the future. And for 5 years, they were in China and they made no money. In fact, they were losing quite a lot of money. And they put that 32 million into Tencent. And for a number of years, Tencent was losing money. And it came down to a board meeting. There were 13 board members and 8 voted to stay in Tencent and 7 voted to sell. And I can't confirm this number, but I have heard in an event, but I couldn't find the actual facts last night. My understanding in an event that I was told, I heard a speaker talking about it, the 7 voted to sell it for 20 million. So I want to be clear, they were actually going to lose money. They were going to lose 12 million, but they'd had enough of losing money in China and they didn't bet on they didn't see the big picture. And it came down to one vote. One person voted, 8 beat 7. And it's the best venture capital investment ever. I mean, to put in perspective, Tencent owns WeChat, which is like WhatsApp, PayPal, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn, Twitter, all put in one place. And about 900 million Chinese people use it every single day. What can you learn from that? And then the last one is Mukesh Ambani. Now, I'll be frank with you, I didn't actually even know who Mukesh Ambani was until I started reading all the research, but I loved having global diversity. And he was part of the Reliance Group. It was family owned, but and again, it was in petrochemicals and everything. But in 2002, they basically said the Reliance, they formed a company, RelianceInfo.com, and it will usher in the digital revolution in India and herald a new way of life for India. The founders' dream of harnessing the power of information technology and communications to build new India is the seedling that has grown Reliance. To make this dream a reality, Reliance.com, under the leadership of Mukesh Ambani, has created the overarching digital infrastructure. So what they were doing was putting the digital infrastructure down in terms of fiber optic cables. Now, what a lot of people don't know is one of the massive rises in the Indian economy is because they got very cheap internet, and everyone's got access to cheap internet, which has allowed this massive growth in the company. But you can imagine the determination and resolve to go and lay out all of this on the vision and the dream of where the world was going. And what he was commenting is the architecture and the functionality of this network is dynamic to keep pace with the evolution of technology. Again, this is not 2020, this is 2002. Reliance Info is progressively expand the fiber optic cable network across the country. We ultimately want to seamlessly connect every individual, home and office, 640,000 villages, 2,500 towns and cities in India. Now again, in 2020, that's like, oh, that's logical. How many of you were thinking in 2002 to go to India and lay out the digital framework for India? Today is the 5th wealthiest person in the world. Lee, just as my interest before I go any further, are some of these patterns and trends becoming, are they providing awareness now where, people didn't make money in a 2 to 5 year period? They said, right, there are structural shifts happening. I understand these structural shifts. I believe in these structural shifts, and I'm going to bet the next 10 or 20 years. And what we've seen in the last even 6 months is everyone goes, oh, these guys are lucky. Jeff Bezos made $13 billion in a day. It's not the truth. They've spent 25 years and in some cases 20 years preparing for this moment. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. What's frightening is we all know the stories, but seeing the figures written down like this, it's actually like an aha moment where you actually realize the amount of work and backdatedness that has gone into creating where they are today.
Well, you ain't seen nothing yet, because why did the crash help them? And the first one is that they had to have resourcefulness. They would not succeed. I've given you story after story of resourcefulness and how they were no better or worse than anyone else, and everyone else was failing, but they had resourcefulness. And there's a story of Walmart which has nothing to do with technology, but I want to share it with you because I learned this from Tony Robbins years ago. In 1974, Walmart had 778 stores. At the time, its 2 biggest competitors were Sears with 851 stores and Kmart with 1,326 stores. The combined value of Sears and Kmart was 65 times greater than Walmart. And at the time, the stockbrokers, because they're always the cleverest ones, and the investment bankers said there's no way for a discount store like Walmart to grow anymore because they've already serviced every single city. They've already got a store. They can't have two stores. And it was really interesting because the founder, Sam Walton of Walmart, was very resourceful. And he said, no, what about taking two towns that could be 100 miles apart and stick a Walmart between them, and people will travel to find a discount. And today there's 7,900 stores, $400 billion in revenue, 1 million employees. I read a report in the last month or so where Walmart was actually in the top 5 most innovative companies in the world. And in fact, it's, as I understand it, Amazon's #1 competitor in the digital space. And Kmart went bankrupt and merged with Sears in 2005. And $1,000 invested in 1974 in Walmart would be worth $420,000 today. And that is a classic example of resourcefulness. So a question for you, Lee, and or anyone that wants to post it. What is the #1 resource out there in the world? You know, why do some people win and some people lose? Why do people fail? What excuses do you use when you say you failed? What is the #1 resource that people need? I've got customer, I've got time, I've got persistence, I've got relationship, I've got plan for long term, I've got data information, I've got mindset, I've got thinking ability, I've got mindset, I've got hope and hard work. Success always comes through hard work, believability, purpose, lateral thinking. So brilliant. You know, all of them are important. Time, money, human, people, blah, 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 customers. But actually the ultimate human resource is human emotion. Okay. And it starts with you. And when you look at these stories and these patterns of the founders, the founding team, you know, not only did they manage their own human emotion with the most resourcefulness, because every single person has limitations. Bill Gates, although he's the second wealthiest person in the world, doesn't have enough money to do what he wants to do in the philanthropic space. Every single person has constraints. And so the #1 thing when it comes to resourcefulness is, what are you going to do with human emotion? And it starts with your human emotion, and then it's your team, and then it's your customers, and then it's your community, et cetera, et cetera. So the second story I wanted to tell you of resourcefulness was Salesforce. And if you've watched or read the book Behind the Cloud, a brilliant story of Salesforce, another good company that started in 1999. And they were tiny, taking on a massive competitor. And they literally did guerrilla marketing. So this massive competitor would be having a massive event, and they hired all these actors to turn up with pickets. And their pickets were like, no more hardware, no more hardware. And they were all picket outside the thing because the whole thing was Salesforce, the online, it was a CRM, customer relationship management system in the cloud. And so they basically made a mass protest of paid actors. And then suddenly everyone was like, who's the Salesforce? And then it got on the press and whatever. And the next thing people started to know who they were. But even a better story, their #1 competitor flew all their top clients to Cannes in France for like this massive event. Okay, you can imagine how much it cost them. And Salesforce got wind of this. So they flew like their top execs over to France, and they got in all the different taxis as translators, apparently. And in the hour-long taxi ride it took from the airport to the conference, these guys spoke to them the whole time about Salesforce. So they were going to see their competitor, and they spent an hour talking about Salesforce before they even got to the competitor event. Needless to say, the competitor's gone out of business today, and Salesforce is the 14th biggest technology company in the world. So another very interesting thing. The second thing that a crash does is it cleans out your competition. So, you know, you can now really focus that you don't have a huge amount of competition out there. The third thing is you've got access to good quality people. You know, we believe there's a massive benefit to Cape Town and Shanghai, and there's a great story of Spotify, which is out of Sweden, I think, certainly one of the nomadic countries. And he said the average person in Silicon Valley changes jobs every 18 months, and therefore to spend a lot of money on development and personal development and everything, it's such a waste of money because they just job hop from one company to the next. Whereas in Spotify, the average time someone stays is closer to 7 to 10 years. And, you know, so in a crash, good people, you can attract good people. And that's what you build the ethos upon of where you're going. And then equally, struggles create team spirit and culture. There's nothing better, whether you're a sports team or a business team, to have been through pain together, come out the other side to build culture. And great teams are built on culture. And I mean, there are numerous stories about Amazon or Alibaba. I told you one already when Alibaba was going through its own SARS back in its early days that nearly crushed it. And now every single team member had to list 20,000 merchandise themselves. It didn't matter whether you were the accountant, the programmer, the bookkeeper, the whatever. Every single person had to list 20,000 each. Today we have Alibaba. And so it's not Darwin's theory, it is Darwin's theory. It's not the strongest who will survive. It's the ones that best adapting to change. And I just wanted to share one last story where I was listening to a brilliant book, which I highly recommend, called The Rise of Superman. And it was talking about the CEO of Shell that did research recently in the last couple of years. Now, the average Fortune 500 company only lasts 40 years on average. And Shell's been going for 83 years. So he wanted to look at why do certain companies stand the test of time? And they did thousands of research studies and cases and whatever. They finally got it down to 17 different metrics. And the number one metric was the ability to deal with change and adaptability. So you might want to look into that for your own ideas. So what were the patterns of success? Now, you might argue with me that there were more patterns. I'm sure there were. But the 8 overriding patterns that I got a message here that I just need to check something. Please, okay. Okay, so the 8 patterns. First one is that they were very resourceful and they were very brave. Men or women, Sheryl Sandberg, how many of you would have walked away from a corporate job in the White House to join a startup with no real track record, no real proper funding, and no job position? If you're honest with yourself. They found a way to be resourceful and get capital. Okay? And I just want to check, Lee, were you saying my WhatsApps are coming up on the screen? Oh. Because all of these ideas, the Jeff Bezos ideas, think for the long term, obsess over customers, that's all good and well. Alibaba, build a company and not earn any revenue for 4 years. Someone has to pay salaries. There are costs. And so you have to have capital. And when others shrunk to survive, they invested. They invested in growth. They invested in innovation. They invested in marketing. They invested in growing their market share. And Willem van der Post, who's actually doing the next webinar, shared some amazing research on the VIP breakfasts we gave, and I can't remember the stats, so I'm not going to try to repeat them. But in the last crash, those companies that tried to shrink their way out of success lost massive market share. Those people that took advantage of the crash and spent their way out of success actually massively grew their market share. And again, I'm not saying indiscriminately spend. I'm saying very strategically take advantage. They saw the structural changes as opportunity. They understood the trends, the macroeconomics, the human emotion, and they saw it as a massive trend. There are structural paradigm shifts that happen in society, not only technology. It's societal, it's political, it's technological. And these paradigm shifts happen, and you need to be able to spot the trends and the intersection. They took on the incumbents. They were not scared of the big established players. They fundamentally shifted the rules of the game. And equally, they did that not just by making things slightly better. They 10x the customer experience or more, and they solved customers' problems. There's a lot of businesses out there. I always learned this from Richard Branson. The most simple thing in business, solve someone's problem. The founders never gave up. I went on and on tonight, and I'm sure I could have spent another hour talking to you stories about what they did in massively difficult situations when they were on the brink of failure. And they were driven by more than just profit. Jeff Bezos himself says when he invests now, he doesn't invest in mercenaries. Mercenaries just want to make a profit. he invests in, what's the opposite? Missionaries. Because a missionary is there for purpose. They will stay the long game through tough times. And what he says is that actually missionaries in the end make a lot more money than mercenaries. And so, you need to make these decisions. Are you a missionary? Are you a mercenary? And what are you looking at? You have to be a bit quirky to be in this club. So let's look at COVID and let's look at the paradigm shift that we're all going through and some of the patterns that are repeating themselves. Well, just like in 1995, when suddenly the internet became available to everyone and people started to get, faster internet in their homes and everything else, it created a massive adoption curve. Most people in 2000 didn't have laptops or even cell phones. And then look what's happened over 20 years. It was pushed up the adoption curve. Well, COVID has done exactly the same thing. I've already explained this graph. And just to give you three examples actually. I live in South Africa, and right now we've got a thing called load shedding, which is every now and again the electricity switches off. And I was given a quote about 2 months ago, and I kind of haven't really looked at it, because I'm certainly not going to go out and spend $10,000 on a system for pleasure. I just want electricity. I just want stuff to work. But now it's starting to really affect my personal life, my business life. And on Sunday morning at 10 a.m., it was raining, pissing with rain. It was freezing cold. I was looking after my son, and suddenly the power went out again. And now I could do nothing. It was raining, couldn't watch TV. I'm stuck at home. It's cold. And I went from a early adopter to a flippin' late majority investor. I was like, right, I am getting one of these things. And now it's a non-negotiable. Now it's just, what am I getting? That's an example of how pain pushes you up the adoption curve. I've gone from this is a nice to have to this is a necessity. And the next thing is that you've got these pattern repeats. You've got the boom bust cycle. It's happening. It's happened. Look at the stock market. Look at it's happened. We're in the middle of it. There's a technology shift. If you're not aware of the technology shift and the onboarding of all these exponential technologies and artificial intelligence and big data and Fintech and SaaS tech and prop tech and all these fancy acronyms, you don't have to get complicated about it. Blockchain and crypto, all this, you don't have to. You just have to acknowledge there's a technology shift happening, and it's a pivotal, fundamental, generational shift that's happening right now. And if you don't understand this, I highly recommend you join for the next webinar with Willem. To give you an example of this, back in March, we've been on Zoom for at least probably 5 years. And back in March, suddenly everyone's in lockdown. And most of my mates, and this is a picture and it's a bit of fun, but it's all my university mates. And we literally had never had a get together other than face-to-face. And suddenly we were forced to have Zoom sessions together. And what I found fascinating is that none of my corporate mates even knew what Zoom was. Now, if you do or don't know, Zoom went from 10 million users in March to something ridiculous, 300 million users in 3 months. It caused it to crash. But more importantly, in the business space, businesses had to go online and have virtual AGMs. We've been having virtual AGMs since I can't remember if it was 2014 or 2015, but that was our first year. And now companies are being forced to do it. But this is where it gets really interesting. And Lee, I got some great research just today. Do you know that in America, companies like Amazon and Google and stuff haven't said to your team, go home. They've said, don't come back for a year. And on the back of that, in San Francisco, the house sales listings have gone up 700% in the last 3 months, okay? The average income, the average house price in San Francisco is 11 times the average income. So even though you get paid a fortune in San Francisco, it's 11 times. Now the country average is 3.2. And so people are going, well, I don't have to live in San Francisco anymore. I can go live anywhere and I can work for Google or Amazon. Equally on top of that, recruiters are not going, well, you have to live in the Bay Area to be able to work at Google. They're going, well, actually, now we've got the whole globe. Think about how exciting this structural shift is in terms of where business is going. And these things are phenomenal. These are massive structural shifts. And, I know that I live in Neisner and people have poo-pooed me for living in Neisner for years. And yet one of my friends runs one of the biggest estate agencies in Neisner, and they had their best month last month that they've had in years. Because people are realizing they don't have to live in London or San Francisco or New York or Joburg. They can now go live in the lifestyle. And this is what I mean by structural shifts. societal shifts, to society 5.0. And we're going to run, this is so important, we're going to run an entire webinar about this. But we've been talking about this for 18 months, and it came from the Japanese, and it's all about how the world is changing. The digital transformation, the imagination, the creativity, solving problems, value creation, how we've gone from hunter to agrarian to industrial to information age, and ultimately to the creative society, which is where we are now. Now, this was coming, and I probably thought this was 5 to 10 years away. We've been talking about it, it was coming, and COVID's just forced this adoption right up by 5 or 10 years. It's solving the SDGs, which are the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, there's 17 problems on this planet that the world decided were the #1 problems they wanted to sort by 2030. And the #1 is no poverty. So the greatest challenge on the planet is no poverty. And they want to solve that by 2030. And you might just be talking to some people that have a plan. And I'm not going to go into this in detail because we're going to have a whole webinar on this, but it's about problem solving, diversity, decentralization, resilience, and sustainability. Please notice that none of these slides were made post-COVID, things like decentralization and stuff. Now you start to notice how this trend adoption is being accelerated. And then a guy called Roger Hamilton came out with Entrepreneur 5.0, and there's a whole insight into that. And then, what is the difference between an entrepreneur and Entrepreneur 5.0? And it's ultimately, the dream from everyone's to become a unicorn, $1 billion company. And nowadays it's to be a zebra. It's about sustainable prosperity. It's about us winning together. It's about community. It's about quality. It's about collaboration. It's about user success. It's not just about Lee and Scott becoming the next Mark Zuckerberg. It's about everyone that's our shareholders and our users sharing in that success. And if you look on the thing here, it's not only about profit, but it's also about purpose. And so that's why the investors changed, because Investor 4.0, 4.0 is just all about venture capital, and they invest in 10 bets, 9 of them fail, they make money out of 1. Investor 5.0 is a much more sustainable. It's a venture builder. It's a collaboration. And again, Willem talks a lot about this in the next webinar, but it's the way to success. And it means that rather than getting a 10% chance of success out of 100, you can actually 7 times increase that chance of success. And it's ultimately driven by having the purpose and then having the right team to be able to execute. And then the last part is you add the technology part to it. And they talk about an EXO, an exponential organization. Now, we have done some private breakfasts on this. And again, Willem and I in the next webinar are going to go into this in deep. But there are 11 things you need to know. And it's a formula. And again, if you want to look at those companies that we discussed now over the last 20 years, huge amounts of research has been done. And it's been scientifically put into formulas. And you can either turn your own company and follow the formula to get success, or if you're starting and wanting to invest in companies, you need to look at the formula. There's a formula to success. Just like when your mom or your grandmother bakes a cake and you try and bake the same cake with a recipe, if you use the recipe, you're going to be 80 or 90% the same. Now, it might not have the brilliance of your grandmother because it had a bit of a personal flair, which is exactly the role of resourcefulness and everything we discussed. But the formula is scientific. And that's where Wealth 5.0 comes in, because with this whole societal shift, wealth is also shifting. And there's key concepts to wealth. And like I said to you, we're going to be running a whole webinar on this, where it'll be about your impact. What is the purpose? It starts with your purpose. The bigger your purpose and the bigger the impact that you have on the world, the more value you can create, which is point number 2. The more value you create and the more people you reach, the more you're ultimately going to create value for yourself. And it's based on that whole Zig Ziglar principle. You can have anything you want in life if you help enough other people get what they want. So if you help 100 people get wealthier, that's great. But if you help 1 billion people get wealthier, it makes a substantial difference. High touch. What's so interesting is that all of us love our gadgets and all that. But how many of you like a personal one-to-one? How many of you prefer private banking or being treated special or personalized service? And that's the balance where people want high touch. High tech, using all the technology to provide a better customer service. And quite frankly, people don't care how it works. I don't care how Uber works. But I can tell you one thing today. I had a meeting. I put in my Uber. 2 minutes later, it picked me up, dropped me perfectly at the spot. I had my meeting. 2 minutes later, I was picked up, taken back. I mean, it actually couldn't be more efficient if they tried. Literally, other than when they're going to put me in a flying drone soon and I wouldn't have even had to sit in traffic. And then finally, it's ultimately about digital and the whole problem solving and future proofing. And this is, again, focusing on the top problems. Now, if you're not sure about the top problems, go look at them. The world has crowdsourced the top problems, and there's 17 of them. And we decided to focus on number one. And so let's look through here quickly. And I'm nearly finished in terms of these, but you've got awareness globally. Like what did COVID do? And it created awareness. What did the .com boom do? It created awareness. People didn't even know what the internet was. Suddenly the NASDAQ, what's the NASDAQ? And like the companies like, Amazon and whatever were suddenly like, everyone's talking about them. It created awareness. And so did the .com bust create awareness, because it was like, oh, look, Warren Buffett said, don't invest, you fools. You shouldn't have invested, blah, blah, blah. Created awareness. What's COVID done? Exactly the same thing for different reasons. Whether you liked having online meetings or liked doing webinars, you learned pretty quickly in the last 4 months. Otherwise, you weren't in business. Whether you're an employee or an employee or an entrepreneur. And then lastly, when there is a structural shift and multiple structural shifts, it creates a lot of fear. And most people don't like change, and they run away from it. They believe it's fear. And yet some people have an early understanding. They can spot the trends. They can join the dots. And as Steve Jobs said, it's easy to spot the dots looking backwards. But how many of you knew that you wanted a smaller, to put 1,000 songs in your pocket? Or 20 years ago, how many of you knew you wanted an iPhone? Okay, did you get hold of Steve Jobs yourself and say, hey, dude, I actually really want an iPhone so that I can stay in contact with everyone all day and I can listen to my music and, So, it's an understanding of where technology is going and really betting on the long game. That's why I played you the video. And I know it was 4 minutes long from Jeff Bezos. But if you want to win in the space and you have short to medium term thinking as either an entrepreneur and or an investor, you will fail. I've no doubt in my mind. It's about having that long-term thinking. And then lastly, I heard this a while ago, but the definition of luck is when preparation meets opportunity. And the question I've got for everyone is, 20 years later, all these people I spoke about, are they lucky? Was Sheryl Sandberg lucky? Wealth went from 1.8 billion to 2.4 billion in the last 6 months. Was she lucky? Or did she bet on the future where she knew it was going and leave her big fancy corporate job for complete risk to go to a ranked startup and back herself and that team in the middle of the last crash, build Google into profitability, then do it again in the next crash in Facebook? And today you see the results. And that's an example of when preparation meets opportunity. They have been preparing for 20 years for the structural shift. All that COVID's done is it's made awareness. Again, internet shopping in India is up 42%. Internet sales in America have gone through the roof. Suddenly people are like, oh, this Amazon thing is not just for early adopters. I too want to use it. I don't want to go to the shops. Boom, preparation meets opportunity. Some people call them lucky. And so let's look at the value creation. And Lee, you haven't seen this before. No one has, not a single person on the planet, because I did this last night. And if you invested $10,000 in Amazon in 2000, so not when they started, in 2000, in the last crash, today it's worth 274 million. If you invested $10,000 in Alibaba in the last crash, today it's worth 108 million. If you invested $10,000 with Elon Musk, today it's worth 40 million. And if you invested $10,000 alongside Naspers, today it's worth 55 million. But I also think the rules of the game have changed. And there was a story that some of you have heard me talk about before called Salesforce. And in 1999, they went out to all the venture capitalists and they said, hey, CRM, customer relationship management, is going to change. It's going to go into the cloud. And people are like, you crazy. People will never, ever let their data leave their mainframes in their office. And they said, watch. And none of the venture capitalists or bankers would invest. So they said, fine, I'll go to my customers. They know it works. And they all invested. And that's how they built Salesforce. And today, it's the 14th biggest technology company in the world. And again, I highly recommend the book Behind the Cloud. And so we took this concept back in 2014 and we're like, that is amazing. Rather than help a few venture capitalists and investment bankers make all the money, why don't we change the rules of the game? Why don't we not just wait until we IPO and let a few people benefit? Why don't we let a much larger majority? So we're well beyond the startup phase. But why don't we go up the value chain and not be private equity within Uber or Airbnb, these big established brands, but allow people to participate up the value chain. And that's really where our wealth partner concept started. a number of years ago. And that was where the concept of the Amazon of personal wealth came about. And we went out and we said, right, we can build this. We should build this. We need to build this. The world needs this. And when you look at our numbers now, you know, it's been a very hard 5 or 6 years. We've had to spend many time being misunderstood. And yet now we've got members in 152 countries. We've done over $600 million through the platform. We've paid out, you know, over $12 million in dividends. We won numerous awards. And what's really interesting is that if I was to ask Lee, you know, what's the one thing that she's learned in the last 5 years, I virtually guarantee you that without fail, if we sat around a room figuring out what we'd learned, it would be less about the wins, and we've learned a hell of a lot what not to do in terms of like what doesn't work. In terms of, you know, because when you're trying to do something for the first time that no one else has ever done before, there is no obvious and easy way to do it. But what you do have to do is learn those patterns, those trends of our forerunners, or is that, I nearly said our forefathers, but that's not quite what I'm trying to say. And so let's finish with some mindsets and ideas. Now, for those of you interested, I recommend you hang around for a final 10 minutes where I want to give you an opportunity to actually get involved in a company right now. And just like Amazon, rather than only doing equity, we've actually offered a convertible debt product, which is where the capital is secure against real estate assets. You can earn an income during this time, and you can enjoy in the upside. It's like, you know, agreeing the prices, Apple prices today, but only paying for it in 5 years. And I'll share that for people that are interested, you know, when I've finished with this conclusion. And it's not for everyone. I just want to be clear. But if tonight you've loved the theory and you say, fine, I love the theory, thank you very much. Or if you say, no, I love the theory and I want to get involved, then I recommend staying around. So the mindsets and why they achieve. Well, the first thing with an entrepreneur 5.0, and this is thanks to Roger Hamilton, is they're fully digital, they're data-driven, they're high-tech, they're high-touch businesses. Now, remember what the principles of WealthE 5.0 are as well. The second is that they've each pivoted rapidly to navigate crisis, cutting what wasn't working and doubling down on what was. Okay, very, very important. Okay, like you can't keep building ox wagons when cars have arrived. Doesn't matter how well you make better ox wagons, cars have arrived. The third is that they had high trust with their investors, team, and customers. Their trust account helped them fill their bank account, which gave them fuel to accelerate out of trouble. Very important, trust. Why do you think we're sharing this with our community? I spent a lot of time today messaging our wealth partners because it's about trust. It's about you only succeed as a computer. You only succeed as a community. Lee and I don't succeed on our own. The only way now is you succeed together. And even though we've had all this negativity around the world, they've had a 50% rise in a bad year. Okay, and in some cases, you know, Amazon's 80%, even 100%. Where do you see the next decade? And the question I've got for you, and this is the one I can't answer because I don't know you personally. You could go and invest in what they call the FANGs: Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, Google, etc. Or you could say, well, they've had their run. They've made phenomenal wealth over the last 20 years based on all the paradigms and the shifts and the trends I've shown you. And they will succeed over the next 10 to 20 years. They'll certainly be around in the next 10 to 20 years. Or is it time to understand the next paradigm shift and to get involved using the same patterns and recognition of 20 years ago now to ride the next 20 years? And I would go as far as to say, if you look at the NASDAQ right now, and up until last night when I checked, it actually seems to have recovered today. As fast as it went up, it was going back down. Why? Because it's been driven by hype at the moment. Yes, the fundamentals are right, but I would say the NASDAQ's probably overvalued at the moment. I wouldn't be surprised if it came off 2,000 points because it's run far too fast in 6 months. Why? Because, does anyone want to know? Awareness. Suddenly everyone's like, oh, So I don't know if that was me or you, or someone muting me. Lee probably didn't like me swearing, so she just switched me off so that I didn't swear publicly. But what I said, and I'm going to repeat it just in case, is that what COVID's done is that, for some people, it's like, no shit, Sherlock, this stuff's coming. And what you've got to be doing is focusing on what's happening in the next 10 to 20 years. And really, you've got to ask yourself, are you following the three same steps with your own life, in your own business, in your own investing? Are you picking up the waves? And if you're not, if things are tough, are you picking up the new waves, picking up the new surfboard? So interesting, I was walking down the road.
Hi guys, I hope you can hear me while we are waiting for Scott to come back online. Huh? Now you've just got me. Let me see if I can bring up the rest of the presentation. Hold on one seckie. Sorry about this, everybody.
If it does that again, I'll try go onto my 3G stick. Sorry, I'm on an Airbnb in Cape Town, and I'm only as good as I've got here. Anyway, so to finish what I was saying there is, so this house had this online viewing thing, and I said to Gavin, wow, it must be awesome for estate agents because they don't have to sit around on a Sunday and pick their nose and hope people come in the house. And he said, yeah, but they must be really nervous because now like one person could do 100 houses versus needing an estate agent per house. I said, well, again, no shit, Sherlock. Like we've been telling people for 10 years that the property industry is going to change, when it comes to technology. So, if life's tough, if you're an estate agent, you've sat in COVID and it's been really tough, like you should look at picking a new wave and pick a new surfboard. And, the rest, it doesn't take a superhuman effort. Like you can swim up the Zambezi or you can swim down the Zambezi. You can swim into the waves or you can go with the waves. It's your choice. Okay. And, as Elon Musk said, I think it is possible for ordinary people to choose to be extraordinary. And I think one of the greatest gifts that we all have now is that not only is the opportunity to solve great challenges on the planet, but equally for us to be very purposeful and profitable at the same time. We don't have to be Mother Teresa. We can go out and solve grand challenges and create a lot of value, which creates a lot of value both for companies, for shareholders, for investors, and for the people that are doing it. So these are the 7 webinars that we're going to be running. And I'm conscious of my time. I've probably talked a little bit too much. But in simple terms, webinar 1 you've been on. Webinar 2 is all about EXO businesses and going deeper. We haven't been this deep with Willem.
Okay, guys, while we wait for Scott to join using his mobile, I'd just like to remind you that you can pop any questions that you have in the chat box so that we can put Scott on the hot seat when he gets back to answer any of your questions. I am going to bring up the PowerPoint presentation now so I can run through the webinars with you on what's happening over the next couple of months. So these are the webinars that we are going to be running over the next couple of weeks. Individual invitations will be sent out to everybody who has registered. And you can see our very next one is on the 22nd of September, and we're going to have Willem van der Post come and chat to us about the 11 principles that you need to focus on and the scientific formula to understand the difference between the companies who succeed and those who don't. Welcome back, Scott.
Yeah, I'm sorry, we're having a technology webinar, and I wish Airbnb people in South Africa specifically would understand that you need Wi-Fi better than you need a toilet. So anyway, apologies. So Lee, thank you for bringing those up. And I don't know if you heard me talk about the 8 technology trends and the 8 societal trends that are intersecting. It's a generational opportunity. That'll be the next one. Then one that I'm very excited about, which will be similar to tonight's one, where I've got huge respect for Ray Dalio. I think he's probably the person that I respect the most at the moment in terms of world economies, where things are going, the changing world order, 50 to 70-year monetary cycles, patterns all around finances. And I'm going to research for this webinar and give you all of the best of what Ray Dalio has come up with in the last 60 days. I'm just going to share my screen if you don't mind, Lee,
Yep.
so that I'll take back. Let me go back to this, and then we've got Prof. Veruli. So talking about property specifically and how location is no longer the most important factor, and everything we've been discussing tonight around where real estate is going. We're then going to have a webinar just around Society 5.0, Entrepreneur 5.0, Investor 5.0, Wealth 5.0. Unfortunately, Roger is right in the middle of an IPO. He's listing his company on the New York Stock Exchange. A very good example of a Entrepreneur 5.0, because I remember sitting in Bali 5 years ago and everything they said they were going to do, they've done, which is phenomenal. Unfortunately, because of that and the New York listing, he said he would be happy to do this after the New York listing, but right now it's just crazy. I am talking to him about one of his team members being involved and some other high-powered people. We're still going to have the webinar, it won't be with Roger. And then finally, we've got an incredible panel with David and Willem, specifically myself and possibly one other, but it's a surprise, I'm not going to mention names. And that's where it's going to be a panel discussion. So it's not going to be a presentation, it's going to be a panel discussion. We're going to talk and take the last 6 webinars, and it'll be your choice. It'll be towards the end of the year. You can see that's towards the end of November, to discuss the world, where we're at, where we're going. And, David Orban's one of the greatest thinkers in this space, equally has tremendous business skills and is a venture capitalist or venture builder now, to be honest. And Willem van der Post is a CA, ex-Deloitte, et cetera, 100% in the technology space as well, and a venture builder himself. So it'll really give people, a great way to take all the things that we've spoken about, process it over 2 months, and then to ask questions. So to finish off, and I've lost a bit of time with the internet causing me challenges, is that I want to talk about an opportunity right now that's available at the moment. And that is where I believe the world has fundamentally shifted. So again, 20 years ago, the right thing to do was to build one Amazon and build it and they will come, everyone comes to Amazon. I believe the world's changed. We've got hyper-personalization, we've got big data, we've got artificial intelligence. It's now about having a meta marketplace where you've got localized marketplaces that solve localized problems using global infrastructure and global solutions. And so that's why we talk about the Amazon of personal wealth. And, yes, Amazon has provided us with a trustworthy, safe, effective, cost-efficient, cuts out the middleman way for us to buy goods online. But there isn't one when it comes to private wealth and people being able to build private wealth and be in control of their own lives and create their own financial freedom. And that's where we've built the platform. We're calling it Powered by Wealth. It's right at the center. It is a play on words as well, where, it's not only powered by the platform, but powered by wealth itself. If you take someone like Investec, we can provide them with the platform. It's all the look and feel of Investec, but it's powered by wealth. And then one of our partners is a company called OfferNet. We're working directly with Willem van der Post and again, his company here. And it's all about hyper-personalization. So again, Lee is not interested anymore in just getting ads. Like, she wants to get stuff that is 100% targeted to her for her unique needs, her desires, her problems. And that's where this hyper-focus, hyper-personalization comes in. If you don't understand the digital space, the digital consumer, the digital enterprise, and how to provide the hyper-focalization, focus and personalization, I called it focalization. That's what happens at 8:30 at night. My point being is that this is where the world's going. Now, whether you own your own business, if you own your own business, you have to know what this is. If you're an investor, you need to understand where the world's going. You need to spot the trends that we're talking about, because this is where the world's going over the next 10 to 20 years. And that's why we've created our meta marketplace. The Global Wealth Group is our holding structure. We've got the platform in the center. We've got global marketplaces. We've got local marketplaces. We've got real estate top left, diversification top right, genres bottom left, community bottom right. We started with Wealth Migrate. Most of you know us as Wealth Migrate. It was a global real estate marketplace. Yes, well done. That's exactly it. And it needed a platform. Just like Amazon. And just like Amazon pivoted, we've got the Wealth University and the Wealth Movement, which are part of our community building. And please just shout, Lee, if at any point. You know, it's interesting, Genius U is about to list on the New York Stock Exchange. We help them with their first raises all through our platform. I think we've done, I stand to be corrected, 3 different raises on our platform for them. You know, Cashbox, Zuza out of England, the Enterprise Development Property Fund, which is a whole, you know, empowerment offering. These are all live, by the way. Wealth diversification, all live. Whether you know about them or not, they're all live already. This is, as you see it, this is our ecosystem. The next thing going live, private wealth. We believe that it's important to have a high net worth affluent brand, because when someone's investing $100,000 plus, they want a very different thing from someone who's investing $100. And with time, other local marketplaces in country, other partners, other diversified product, because it doesn't just have to be real estate, it can be anything in the primary markets. We're going to be launching WealthE SA and ultimately multiple marketplaces. But what I'm going to be very clear here is Lee's not going to be launching these and Scott's not going to be launching these. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be providing the infrastructure, the knowledge, and the know-how. Think of it as a business within an ecosystem to allow local entrepreneurs to be able to go out and do it and to operate within our global ecosystem, like we've already got with our China team. And then the same thing with millennials, a focus on millennials, a focus on women. I believe that's $1 billion opportunity just on its own. It's the greatest challenge, one of the greatest challenges on the planet, is empowering women with access to financial education and wealth. And we need a passionate, woman-driven team to drive that, and even Sharia compliant. And it's just a few of the examples, you know, the 20 plus marketplaces here. I see a vision 5 years from now where people won't fully understand how it all came about, and they'll think it was all magic and they'll call it luck. And I would say it's rather when preparation meets opportunity, and the opportunity has arrived. And then one day, finally, we'll bring out Wealth Create, which is where, you know, ultimately people be able to invest from $1. So whether it's the look and feel of millennials and wealth, whether it's women and wealth, everything powered by wealth, it's easy for us. All the tech is built. It's literally a marketing and strategy and team-based thing, which is where we talk about now the growth of the company and taking advantage. And so what's the opportunity? Well, in simple terms, we're raising $5 million, $2 million in debt, $3 million in equity. On the debt side, we're offering a 7 to 10% interest per annum for 5 years with an automatic transfer into shares. So it does say Wealth Migrate, because we're changing the UK holding company into the Global Wealth Group to reflect the big term picture and vision. The beauty there is it doesn't matter whether all the money is made in women and wealth, or it's made in Wealth Migrate, or it's made in private wealth. It doesn't matter. You're a holding company shareholder. You own a piece of everything. The reason we're doing it is for strategic acquisitions and commercial acceleration of our business within the ecosystem to 10x the metrics and ultimately dramatically increase the valuation on par to 100 million valuation IPO. Now, I want to be clear with you. Roger told me how to do it 5 years ago. I don't think that our team fully understood that and or believed it was possible. And watching him literally do it on the New York Stock Exchange right now is a humbling experience, certainly for me, and I think many of our team members, because it truly is a reality. The returns are based on the size of the investment. The interest is paid quarterly. It's secured against our real estate assets. This is important. At the moment, there's 3 things people want. They want to protect their capital. They want a return on their investment, a cash return, and they want to be able to have a piece of the upside based on where the world's going. And so we've got about $4 million of real estate assets. We decided to make the debt component $2 million so that we had 200% cover. Now, I'm not going to get into all the details, but if Lee and I were to arm wrestle and say, oh, we've had COVID, the real estate assets have gone to 3 million, it doesn't matter. There's still adequate cover, which is why we didn't borrow 4 million while we're borrowing at 2 million. In terms of the looming repercussions of COVID-19 and all the structural shift we've spoken about, we've been perfectly positioned. At no point did we even skip a heartbeat. We're all on Zoom. We live all over the world. Lee is stuck between Dubai and Saudi Arabia. She should be in Saudi Arabia. You know, I'm in Neisner, Ken's in England, you know, et cetera. It doesn't make any difference to us. You know, But what we can do now is we can help global entrepreneurs and institutions with specifically targeted basis. So whether it's an entrepreneur in Saudi Arabia or an entrepreneur in South Africa or a global women in wealth movement, we can provide them and ultimately grow the meta marketplace. And what we're excited about is it's taking the whole concept of venture building. It's onboarding fintech entrepreneurs, expanding the business with an ecosystem, and ultimately becoming a hub for marketplaces. And what excites me hugely is rather than earning $10 million from one marketplace, imagine earning $10 million from 20 marketplaces. You've got multiple income streams. You're not tied to like one market or one asset class or one currency, which is what Ray Dalio teaches you. The number one principle to succeed in the current market is diversification. And ultimately, we want a dual list. Ken and I have been talking about it and been setting ourselves up for a long time now between Hong Kong and London. Although I have to say, with Roger being able to do it on the New York Stock Exchange, it certainly needs further analysis. We aim to be 500 million in 5 years and $1 billion within 7 years. And I know some of you will say to you, yeah, but Scott, you said that in 2014. I agree with you. It's hard to be misunderstood, and sometimes it's hard to misunderstand yourself. And I think I've got some of the genes and problems of Elon Musk, which is where I think that a rocket should get launched in 2 years, and his team actually tells him it takes 5 years. And I know Lee knows what I'm talking about, because I think that things should happen a lot quicker than they do. But what's interesting is that when we were talking blockchain and cryptocurrency in 2016, 2017, it's now becoming mainstream. You know, we were like, ooh, woo-woo people early, 3 or 4 years ago. And that's why I'm not getting caught up anymore what's happening in the next 3 years. I'm talking about the trends we can learn from 20 years and where we're going forward for 20 years. Because the one thing I can guarantee you, everything we've discussed tonight will happen in 20 years. Whether it happens in 2 years, 5 or 10, the jury can remain out. And then each acquisition we bring in not only leverages the partners, but it also increases the whole worldwide wealth community. So it's a win-win-win scenario, and everyone's benefiting off the technology, the revenue, and the profitability. So what's the opportunity? Well, we've got a level at $25,000. It's a 7% interest, a $2.20 a share, which is a 3% discount off the current share price. Again, you don't pay for it today. You only pay for it in 5 years, but you agree the price today. The gold is 100,000 at an 8% interest and a 7% discount. And the platinum is 250,000. It's a 10% interest. It's a Class A share, and it's a 12% discount. And then just to clarify some of the important notes, again, it converts in 5 years. You've got a 5-year window to earn income for 5 years. We are protecting the income by keeping money in the bank to be able to pay the quarterly dividends. The capital is protected against the real estate assets. And then if you're worried that you're the only schmo that's thinking about this, there's already $500,000 in the bank. There's $500,000 in contracts, and there's $1.1 million in warm commitments. So when you say to us, well, why are we even having this webinar if it's already done? Well, I remind you of two things. One is that it's not done until it's done. And the way to accelerate a business with growth capital is to have the growth capital in the bank to be able to execute. And actually, we're looking to do a total raise of 5 million, of which 2 million is in debt and 3 million is in equity. And so, although we've got good commitments and very good momentum, we wanted to allow people to participate if they were interested based on everything that they've heard and learned. Where's the funds going? 48% into CapEx, into the tech and the platform, 24% into digital products, branding and marketing, 18% into marketplace rollout, human capacity and OpEx, and 10% into corporate governance and compliance. So really looking at creating globally recognizable compliance and corporate governance. And in terms of the next steps, well, you can go to the landing page. The team has actually built a very nice landing page. And if I just go to it here quickly, and by the way, I've shared all these links. I'm not going to go into each one of them, but you go and read about all these different entrepreneurs, be it Matoshi Son or Elon Musk. There's some brilliant stories here all around resourcefulness and what they did and how they did it, etc. And I've shared all of these stories with you. But if I go back to this page, this is where you can actually go and read all about it. You can watch the video. You can go and download a fact sheet. It's a 4-page fact sheet. You can book a one-to-one. This is not a mass marketing thing. It's only for specific people. It's only for qualified people. And you have to qualify, not only do you want to do it, but you also have to qualify for us. And there's only for specific people. So you talk one-to-one with one of our teammates, one of our investment consultants, or Lee or myself, etc. You can go read all about it. There's the ways to participate. the 8 things you need to know, and then you can, read everything I've kind of been through, watch videos of what other, people have said, et cetera, et cetera. Ultimately, you want to speak to one of our wealth consultants, or you can just go to the platform. If we're talking about platforms, and I don't even have it open, I should, but let me just open it up quickly. You can literally go into our diversified platform. And this is what I love so much. I mean, you're literally seeing me do this live, and it's not a property investment. Obviously, it's a private equity and or convertible debt investment. You can literally go in, you can put in any one of your different structures. I've got 4 different structures. You can go and you've got the convertible debt, you've got the equity, and you can literally participate. So if you don't want to talk to a human being and you want to fully embrace where the world is going, well, you can do it online as well. And finally, I know that people want the personal contact, and there's no one better than Lee if you want to reach out and WhatsApp and ask questions, etc. in terms of it. So Lee, what I'd like to do now is I'm conscious of the time that I've run. Sorry, I get passionate in this space and there's so much to share. I could probably have gone another half an hour if I'd gone into all the details of each founder more, and the stories that I've shared on the links that people can go and read. But I'd like to run the poll, if you don't mind, Lee. And then equally, before we go into Q&A, are there any really pressing questions or things that you want to say? Because I'd like to run the poll. I've got a final conclusion that I think everyone would like to do, and then I want to run a Q&A and then kind of have a hard stop, certainly sort of on the hour, if possible.
I think I'd just like to say to everyone, firstly, that it is online. Thank you for sticking with us for the last hour and 45 minutes. We do appreciate your time, but we are super excited about where we see the world going and where we see Wealth Migrate and the Global Wealth Group going. And we would love to have you join our journey. We'd love to take you on the ride with us so that you can be part of us building something that has a lasting effect on so many people, including yourselves. So I look forward to chatting to you. Reach out to me. I'm happy to share the information and speak to you about the different aspects. So please just feel free to reach out to me, WhatsApp me, call me, send me a mail. We're all here to help.
Cool. I'm going to launch the poll. You're not missing anything on the slides. Just in terms of, we'd love feedback, in terms of what you've heard, and if you're interested, not interested, whatever. It's always very valuable for us. Remember, we're talking all night. We've been talking about the trends and where the world's going. And one of the most important ones is personalization. And the more we understand of what you're thinking and what you want, or what you don't want, the more we can try and hyper personalize how we can add value to you. So I think that's very, very, very important. Equally, if you've got any questions or anything you want to put in, thank you, Lee, for putting the link in there. If anyone wants to go to the landing page link where you can go directly, and if you wouldn't mind putting the wealth diversification link in as well, Lee, then it is on the screen if people want to copy it. But my point is, if they just want to click on it, then so be it. I'm going to leave the poll open, and again, I'm just going to talk through a conclusion here. But don't worry about the slides. You don't need a slide to be able to see it. I'll leave the poll open. I can see that 25% of people have voted, so I'll let a few more people. But I think for me, in conclusion, what's really important with what we learned tonight is that generational opportunities come once in a generation. That's why they're called generational opportunities. And what you need to have the ability, if you're wanting to copy Sheryl Sandberg and Jeff Bezos and Jack Ma and Elon Musk and many others, you need to be able to spot the patterns. Okay, and sometimes you don't need to spot the patterns yourself. Jeff Bezos didn't spot all the patterns himself. Someone said, like, you've got this pattern and this pattern and this pattern. But what he did do is say, well, based on these patterns, what's the opportunity? What's the problem that I can solve? What are the waves? What are the big waves that are changing business, changing the way we do things, changing our lives? What are the trends? What are the societal trends that are happening? And what is the intersection? And this is probably the most important thing that I've learned in the last 5 years. There might be multiple waves, multiple trends, multiple patterns, but it's the intersection of all of these that is where the value is created. Because Amazon didn't succeed just because the internet took off. Okay, they succeeded because of multiple trends, all like the fact that cheap internet was becoming available, and the fact that everyone was getting laptops and computers in their houses. and the fact that everyone then got mobile phones and that there was global connectivity, et cetera, et cetera. And those are the trends that you need to be able to look for. And hopefully tonight, I've shared with you a bunch of trends and patterns, and I've given you, and Lee has given you the webinars coming up to go even deeper into many of the stuff that we've overviewed tonight and what we can learn from our predecessors 20 years ago. Why do people become, shareholders in our company? The first one is they want to profit. Don't berate a profit. You cannot be Bill Gates and change the world if you've got no money. If you're a pauper, you can't help anyone. And the point being is that there's nothing wrong with making a profit if you're adding value to people and solving people's problems. So our aim is to 10x people's capital over the next 5 to 7 years. It's to be part of a global community. It's to learn and think and grow. I was with a good business partner today, and he's part of an entrepreneur organization. And so few of us are surrounded by people. We spoke about the number one resource is human emotion. So few of us get to be surrounded by like-minded global thinkers that want to solve global challenges and can talk about these patterns. I mean, you just try to go down the pub and have this conversation with your friend, and particularly your corporate mates, and you're going to have a serious challenge. And so it's about being a like-minded community that can grow to be a global citizen. And then finally, it's purpose. What is your destiny? What's your legacy? What are you going to get remembered for? Are you wanting to create wealth for you and your wife and maybe your children? Or what about generational wealth? What about Joe Kennedy, who in 1929 turned $4 million into $184 million in 3 years in the heart of the worst depression the world's ever had? And to this day, 2 presidents came out of that legacy. In terms of where the world is your life going to be one of purpose and legacy? Because I fundamentally believe that if you understand your why and you get your purpose right, then profit will come anyway. And to finish off, my closing thought is that Peter Diamandis says the world's biggest problems are the world's biggest opportunities. In our case, we're focused on the number one biggest problem in the world. I haven't met a human being on this planet that says, I've met lots of people that say they don't want money. I've met lots of people that say they don't like money. I've met lots of people that say money is the root of all evil and all that other what. But I've never met someone that doesn't want money, and more importantly, doesn't want freedom. And so when we talk wealth, we're not talking about money. We're talking about health. We're talking about happiness. We're talking, most importantly, about the freedom to make the choices so that you're in control of your destiny. And if you take the world and where it's going, it is going to fundamentally intersect over the next 10 years. There's multiple waves, multiple trends, multiple patterns. We can learn from 20 years ago. We can learn the mistakes and the positives, and they're being replicated 20 years later. There's a new generational opportunity that's happening. Whether you partner with us or not, that is not material and not a given based on this webinar. Tonight was to add value. If you want to partner with us and you're the right person, we would love to welcome you on the journey. It's by invite only. And if we don't, we want to celebrate your success as you take advantage, because ultimately, in my opinion, you can have anything you want in life if you help enough other people get what they want. And if nothing else, tonight, Lee, I'd love to pivot into questions if anyone has for the last 10 minutes. But hopefully we've added value to people tonight. And I always say, if you want to empower 1 billion people, it's not about empowering 1 billion people one at a time. It's about empowering people one by one. And so if we added value, we'd love to hear about it. If we can improve, we would equally love to hear about it. But my one real request is, if we added value to you, please share it with others. We've got 6 more webinars, and you can have this recording. Share it with others. It's time to change the world. It's a time to educate and empower people so that they realize structural shifts like COVID are a blessing in disguise of a new future that we're creating together. Thank you. So Lee, I've got a problem. Because I got kicked out, I don't have the questions beyond Rachel Brown, where she said, these are wonderful, a feast of weights. So I'm going to need your help to go through all the questions if there were.
I am just looking at the moment, Scott.
Mike has said, can we invest in ZAR, not using Forex? Mike, look, I would chat with a wealth consultant one-to-one. The overall thing is that you're investing in a global company that is first world currency based, and therefore there are challenges around it. But chat with the wealth consultant. Our attitude is we want to be client obsessed, to copy Jeff Bezos. But there's also realities of what you can or can't do from a legal perspective. I'm thrilled to say that I'm riding along. So Rachel, fantastic to have you on the team. Can you divulge how talks with investor are progressing? So Gavin, average to average. And the reason I say that is that the lady that was spearheading the whole initiative resigned. So they like back to basics to find and rebuild the team and get the person. And so, I mean, nothing's changed. I wouldn't say it's better or worse for us, but unfortunately they and a big corporate have lost their internal driver. And so what was a month away for launch, and we were one of their key partners, is probably, I don't know, Lee, 8 to 9 months away now, you know, realistically. Yeah. I don't know, like, and I mean, it's no fault of our own. It's the lady left. Okay, early adopter smile, fantastic webinar. So thanks for the feedback. Referred to $2 a modular builders. I'm not quite sure, Jay, what you mean by that. Thank you, Sylvia and Susan. Where are all the links? So just for those of you who, certainly those of you stay to the end, you will get a PDF with the slideshow and all the links are here, every single one of them. I learned this from Roger. I thought it was awesome because when Roger was doing his webinar, I was trying to Google all the things and I spent half the time listening to him and half the time trying to find all the links. And then at the end, he gave us all the links. So I thought, what a wonderful gift to give to people that actually attend the webinar. If you're watching the recording and you're not an Inner Circle member or not a Wealth Partner member, then enjoy Google. I want to incentivize people to be part of it, the live opportunity. Right, Lee, which jurisdiction are you governed by FCA in the UK? So Daniel, we've got in South Africa, we're governed by the juristic rep within South Africa. So that's the FSCA. Our global representation is ASIC out of Australia. And we are actually in the process now of getting Europeans. Our wallets are protected by European regulation. And we are at the moment speaking with the European Fund Organizer, which would give us you know, England, Europe, and everything as well. So unfortunately, there is no global solution. It's always local compliance. And so it's a catch-22 between trying to find global solutions and provide local solutions. But ultimately, it's a work in progress and always will. We can actually have multiple structures. So like I or Lee can go on and invest in multiple structures. But actually all our money is invested in, like through the wallets, and all our returns are paid back into our wallets. So it's a bit like if Uber uses different payment systems in different countries. I don't care. I catch Uber in the same way in every country. It comes off my credit card. It's the same user experience. I don't care if they've got different payment gateways in different countries, which they do, by the way. And it's the same thing here. So, you know, if it's best for English people to be regulated by the FCA, we with time will be able to, you know, make sure that that happens, but it won't change their wallet experience at all, their user experience. Lee, I don't know if there's other questions. I can't go backwards. As I said, I can only go forwards.
There aren't any other questions, Scott. I've been trawling up and down the chat to make sure that we didn't miss any questions. So there isn't anything more.
Oh, brilliant. Jay, thank you for mentioning us to A2 Modular. Fantastic. You know, we're always looking for good partners on the supply side and on the demand side. So all welcome. And yeah, Wilhelm saying, thanks, look forward to the PDF. And by the way, thank you for all the positive comments. Really appreciate it. I must admit, these webinars are super fun for me. You know, when Lee and I talk about them, I know I'm giving myself a hell of a lot of hard work, and hopefully people can get some understanding of how much work was put into gathering all this information. But equally, if we can add value in other ways and we are missing things, then please let us know. You know, I'm conscious that I've spent 2 hours now on this webinar, and some people will be like, you bloody crazy, I'm never going to listen for 2 hours. But, you know, it's so difficult to share all this information, and particularly something that we're so passionate about. So I don't know if it's a pro or con. You know, I always get wrapped up the knuckles for too much. But if there's other things you think we should be doing to add value, or other topics that we should be looking at, or, you know, other speakers we should be interviewing, please, we're all ears. You know, Lee and I and the team are only about trying to add as much value as possible. And whether we like it or not, COVID has created a structural change in our lives, and it's with us whether we like it or not, and it's not changing. You know, I gave you those stats for America, just in case you thought that wherever you live in the world was the only place. It is structurally shifting. People are leaving Silicon Valley and will never come back, because in a year's time, they'll be living comfortably in Florida or something. And when Google says, hey, do you want to come back to the office? They'll say no. In fact, one of our tech people, Lee, I don't know if you even know this, literally said to Gavin in the last week, he will never work for a company again where he's forced to work in an office. And that was one of our own people. So yeah.
Well, that's why I had such a good giggle when you were saying that the workers or the team members were sent home for a year and said, don't worry about coming in at all, just go home for a year. And we have the luxury in our company of working wherever we might be placed and around the people that we love. So we are very grateful that we have been on that journey for the past 2 years. So this has not really impacted the way Wealth Migrate does business or our team does business. But we have definitely seen how it has impacted a whole lot of other people. And the amount of times we had meetings with people who it was the first time they were on Zoom, and we spend our lives on Zoom. It was amazing. And that's just one small part about what has happened and the change, because people just accept it now.
I completely agree. So that I'm going to stop sharing. That is all from us, Lee. Really, I appreciate, and I don't think I say it enough to you, for setting all this up. It's 100% a team effort, and without Lee, we wouldn't be sharing anything to all of you tonight. So really appreciate, Lee, everything that you're doing. And even though you are a prisoner in Dubai and trying to get home, you've always got a beautiful smile on your face. So really, really appreciate your hard work. Thank you.
It's my absolute pleasure. Thank you, Scott, for your dedication in doing the research and putting these together. I know it takes a lot of your time, but it definitely shines through on how much you enjoy it when you present to everybody. And everyone who has spent the last 2 hours with us, we appreciate your time and your positive feedback. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to seeing you on the 22nd with Willem van der Post, and details of that will be posted on all our groups and via email in the next couple of days. So thank you once again.
Please share with other people if you found value. Like I wish we had 10,000 people on this webinar, because imagine everything we're sharing is valuable to everybody.
Absolutely. So you will get the links to the recordings and that. Please feel free to share it with whoever you want to, post it on your social media, tag us in that. That would be fabulous. But wherever you are in the world, we hope that you are safe, that you are surrounded by the ones that love you most and that you love. Be blessed, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.